the challenges in this particular context. I hope this next few minutes will be good for them to, try and get associated with this. So let me just contextualize this study a little. So I guess we are all aware of the fact of political isolation of the Northeast region. The fact that Northeast is linked by India through the rest of India, very narrow land corridor, which was, 25 kilometers chicken's neck, as we call it. And we know that Northeast actually has only 1% of its borders with, India, while the rest of it is actually with the external, the country surrounding it. So there was a huge linkages of the external countries there for years, and that's also how the whole shape of Northeast has taken place. How there's so much of challenges and complexities to the region is also because that the 99% of Northeast actually enjoys borders with international borders. So it's not only the geographical distance between Northeast and the rest of India, but also, alongside the fact that, there's also been a kind of a societal political isolation. Uh, Not to forget that fact that it has a very, very interesting ethnic mosaic, and which has actually given Northeast a fabulous flavor, which is, something that we don't get anywhere in the region, but also has complicated in terms of administrative issues and other things. And that's why Northeast is something, a recurring subject for all of us. And I think I've come back to it many times over, and every time there's so much more to learn and so much more to absorb. So I think it's such again a privilege that I was able to write this and discuss this today. So given the fact that that it had always been physically disconnected, socially disconnected, economically, politically disconnected, from the time of independence, the region needed a lot of political accommodation. It also, given of the difficult terrain and other issues, it needed a lot of support from the mainland, which is the center support. And over the years, we've seen how the governments have had to do a lot of administrative reconcilability with the whole region. Many concessions were actually given just to ensure a kind of a stability is introduced in the region. So gradually over time, we actually saw the geopolitical environment becoming much more stable. The internal situation did stabilize. There was, visible changes that has taken place in the domestic stability. And this, in fact, led to a spurt of new ideas and options for tapping the vast, unexplored natural resources of Northeast. I think that is something which has happened subsequently. It wasn't overnight from 1947-50. Over years, it took some time for center and state to work closely together. And I think most importantly, the way I see it now, that the state governments have also seen a raison d'etre, I would say, to work closely with central government, which is in fact a break. This wasn't the case earlier. For very long, we've seen that center and state has been at loggerheads. Because of different political parties in centers, different political parties here, they've never been able to see reason as to why they should work together. Again, those issues have more or less stabilized. There's a lot of, as I said, accommodation and concessions that took place. But today, I think most of the state governments are very enthused with the idea that they need to work closely with central government, and to take not only their own domestic issues forward, but to be part of the larger, the impetus which is happening in India in terms of its outreach towards to the immediate region and even beyond the immediate region. I think this is something which is a new kind of momentum that I see when I'm in the Northeast. So right now, what I actually find that, domestic stability is something that we keep harping on, that the North Indian leaders have actually also played a very key role in Government of India's outreach to the neighborhood. And that's how I think the whole paradigm shifted really. So, how do I see it? How do I see Northeast receiving so much of salience in the contemporary foreign policy of India? First, of course, as I said, India's keenness to deepen its engagement with both South Asia and Southeast Asian economies. Again, Northeast, for its own geographic position, plays a very key role. It's really the bridgehead between South Asia and Southeast Asia. It's also, we've seen over years that India is very keen, and right now, I think regionalism sub-regionalism is not only becoming effective, it's also something that everybody is rallying up. That how South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation didn't work too well, but the other sub-regional cooperation that we're looking at, BIMSTEC is something which again where Northeast plays a very strong role here, again given off its area. And also, the recent global development, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, we've seen how India is taking its rightful claim in the extended littorals, and it is now impinged how India manages the Northeast and how the region, this whole region which covers this entire expanse of the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean, dovetails into this larger role that India wants to play in this extended neighborhood and outside that also. So here, Northeast again, as we speak now, has become a real mover and shaker, I would say, in the core foreign policy that are being taken on, taken here, decided in Delhi, and Northeast is becoming a huge boost to that. So, I mean, earlier, I think everybody is aware of the fact that Northeast, for very large decades, given its instability at that point of time, was a domain for security, issues. And it was always a security establishment who were engaging with Northeast. But I think that again changed with time. And, we've seen one of the first, I would say, most constructive economic policies which had Northeast in its narrative. Maybe it only worked in paper, and I'll discuss that later, but at least it became part of the economic positive narrative that India was, rolling out, was the Lucas policy in the early 1990s, which also, coincided with the liberalization of the Indian economy. And there was a larger view of Northeast was taken, where there was a whole level of ensuring that the stakeholders from the region were part of many of the brainstorming. And we've seen at that point of time, before that, some of these, ministries which came up, which wasn't there earlier. You had other institutes coming up which were dedicated to ensuring that Northeast is part of this larger growth trajectory that India was trying to establish. With Lucas policy, unfortunately, what we did see, I mean, unfortunately, at one level, what we did see was India was able to establish very, very substantial terms of engagement with the economies in East and Southeast. And the time I mentioned, 1990s, was really the boom time when these economies of East and Southeast Asian countries were really on a upward track. And this is when India was, was able to establish not only political, strategic, but a whole lot of commerce with these, with this particular region. But the problem at that point of time was that Lucas policy, while actually did in many ways substantially add to India engaging with ASEAN countries very well, it completely bypassed the Northeast region for a variety of factors, and I think we can discuss that later if need be. So in 2014, when we've seen this NDA government, which was led by Prime Minister Modi, came in, there was a re-examination as to how does one examine or how does one involve Northeast in a larger frame. And that's when Act East policy was unveiled. And Act East policy for Northeast really meant building a network of road and highways, organizing investment fairs, encouraging tourism, building high levels of education institutions. And the whole idea was not only establishing a connectivity within the region and to the rest of India, but also with its immediate neighbors, which is of course Bangladesh and Myanmar very closely. This, in fact, then becomes my first chapter, where I actually examine the potential of the Northeast economy. And I'm going to take a little bit of, slow it down to say that one of my, I think then Monish was reading out my CV. He mentioned that my first book actually was on the Northeast complexities, which was written in 1999, 2000, I think. And at that point of time, and I remember that because I would visit Northeast, and I think I've been one of the lucky few that who's been sitting outside the region, but has been constantly been able to. In fact, the Shelton Kodikara award that I won was actually had given me a lot of travel grant for me to keep coming back to the Northeast, which is what, in fact, I was probably I was the first civilian at IDSA to be given a project in Northeast. Till then, as I mentioned, Northeast was largely a paradigm for the security establishment. I was the first civilian in this institute who actually was, I wanted the project and I was given the project, and my first book of the Northeast came out of that. But even then, I remember when I was, researching for the book, there was this huge buzz about economic potential of the region. at that point of time. And unfortunately, when I was writing the book now, it's like maybe 2 years since that I've been actually researching, and I went back to my earlier notes that I'd written at that point of time. I would actually say, sadly enough, the data is almost comparable, with the only exception that Assam has moved on, like many of the other growing states of India. But the rest of the states have actually not. I mean, there has been improvement. I'm not saying it's really and the same 2 decades ago, but it's not the buzz and the potential that we constantly talked about. It just isn't there. It just wasn't it. I mean, it's yet to happen. So if you actually look at the hard statistics, you'll still find that the Northeast contribution to national economy is still less than 3%. One can always say that yes, there is low population, but even if I'm factoring in low population, the per capita is still three-fourths of the national average, which also obviously hints at the overall economic slowness of the region. If I'm looking, and all of us know that Northeast is an agrarian economy, right? But even if it's agrarian, it only again contributes 1.5% of the food grain production, which also makes Northeast very, very dependent on the rest of India. Despite the fact that it's low populated, it's got large spaces available, farmlands available, but even today as we speak, I don't think more than 40% of the land is under cultivation. Again, there are several factors to this, and my travel to Mizoram, my travel to Arunachal has actually opened my eyes as to why so much of land is not cultivated as yet. I mean, if you actually, interestingly, if you look at the Mizoram and the Bangladesh border, Bangladesh actually grows rice till the actual wall, till the actual barbed wire that's there. But those swaths of land in Mizoram, acres of land is not cultivated. I mean, there's of course a reason why that's so, but I'm just saying that these are, this is, I mean, you see this for yourself when you're actually traveling the region and, going into the deep ends of the thing. Uh, we've always, and again, when I went back to my earlier studies, I remember talked, this whole buzz about prospects for modern industries. Even today, while I speak, there is so much, again, studies, reports, all about the prospects. But the share of Northeast in trade with the neighbors is actually less than 2%. So clearly, there is nothing in terms of the fact that Northeast is able to produce, which is able to sell across. And of course, within India, much of the stuff actually comes to the Northeast because of its own requirement, and there isn't anything that really, except for bamboo, and I'll come back to it later when I talk about it. There isn't much any other factor, and pharmacy. I think the two pillars, I would say, of Northeast at this point of time, in from terms of industry. So, uh, a, a relatively recent report, I think of 2018, it talked about how the industrial sector of all the 8 states had actually increased while the share of agriculture and allied activities had declined. Uh, this is actually for me a very surprising element, because the share of industrial sector, again, the industry base is small, but here again, if I'm looking at what is the industry, it kind of comes, if I look at the report a little more closely, it in fact, this report subsequently was supplemented by another report which actually identified 181 large and medium scale industries in the region. And this is no surprise to anybody, 70% of those are in Assam. And all of that is actually based on the natural resources, which is oil, gas, and wood, of course, the bamboo mission, and tea. So these are the 4 core sectors of the region which are part of this industry sector. So bamboo mission's been very good. Tea, of course, we know tea from the Northeast is fabulous. It's exported. It's all over India also, and of course oil and gas, which is. But that apart, and again, Assam, and I think there's a point that I think our foreign secretary made a few days ago about how Assam plays a key role. Assam really has always been far more, in terms of economy, in terms of every other development, its indicators have always been much higher, not even comparable, much higher than the rest of the states. And I'm not surprised now also that they've actually zoomed ahead. Again, a variety of factors there as to why that's happened. But unfortunately, the rest of that, what has happened to Assam, has not touched upon the rest of the region. So subsequent to falling from that, I actually, in fact, in that particular chapter on economy, I'm actually looked around a little bit, and I've seen that there is increasing evidence to the fact that small size firms and middle scale enterprises are actually providing far greater source of job creation. We've always got these things in our head that it's always big ticket, hugely funded projects are the one which change the landscape. In the Northeast, that is not so. None of these big ticket huge projects have taken place. I mean, which is the earlier oil-based organization, all of that, that's fine. But nothing new has actually taken place. But now, if I'm going to focus on the economy, I would actually suggest that we must re-examine the small firms and the medium scale enterprises, which again has huge potential because of the natural resources in terms of fruits and other organic items that Northeast has, which many of the region of India doesn't have. So coming from there, it's the next chapter, which is on the transport connectivity, which is actually a very transformational landscape that I see from my 1999 to 2000 book to the transport, to the transport improvement that's taken place. I think the milestones have been actually covered in the region, and that is, I think, I won't get into details, and I'm hoping many of you will be able to read the book and see, the details of actually detailed out every sector of the projects that has taken place, the road sector, the airways, the 20 airports which has been built, 20 or 21. Unfortunately, maybe I think less than 10 are functional. That's another problem again, and I've actually critiqued that we are always been aware of the fact that the vagaries of nature and geographical conditions of Northeast is not very conducive to air travel. I'm not too sure the cost benefit of this investments really balance out. I know it's one of the new things that we need when we are trying to develop and we are pacing ourselves, but that is my whole query in this book all the time, that we should not examine Northeast with the benchmark that we examine the rest of India. Northeast inherently has some factors which work for it. Big ticket numbers do not work for Northeast, and for us to think that we can transform it drastically, like we've done to Rajasthan, like we've done to Andhra Pradesh, like we've done to many other states of India, it is simply not possible in the Northeast. And I think that is my whole cautionary approach in this book, that yes, planning is of course needed. And it's a great thing now that the security narrative has moved out and we've actually gone into a growth and development narrative in the Northeast. But even when we are talking about growth and development, we must be very cognizant of the ground situation. This is what I think my transport chapter actually does, and I actually argued in my transport connectivity chapter is that the main chapter the main sector which strikes out for me is railways, which is a very, very small sector just now. A beginning has been made. So my idea is that, particular region to do well, if you're looking at, cannot use your road, which is any case, the terrain. I mean, roads are maintained, whatever the case may be, but we also know sections of road through the year, their maintenance issues. Of course, a lot of it is corruption included also. I'm not saying that. They're deliberately broken, deliberately redone. But that apart, the terrain is difficult. And I've actually said that it's actually the railways which will ensure that the people of Northeast are able to visit the rest of India more easily, and rest of India can visit more easily. And of course, and I've also talked about the coastal activity to the maritime and the coastal sector, which is what is going to change the face of commerce in the Northeast. That is my core argument, that not road, not your air travel, but your coastal connect and your railways. Railway is just a beginning, but I think it's something which will bring a substantial to the region. I mean, there are of course more. I mean, I can discuss how railways can actually become an aggregator for Cairo loop, which is possible in West India, which has been possible in the rest of the country. This is something that we'll be able to. So obviously connected transport. So again, it is the government of India, any of these Northeast institutes and ministries, the huge number of schemes and projects, all there on paper. But, and I tried my best and I reached out to as many official spaces as I could. There is actually no available data to understand how much any of these schemes, but there are other some specific schemes in terms of local project schemes. We have not been able to understand how much it is being accessed by the population. So many a times, many projects, many schemes were actually initiated because a particular stakeholder, a particular group of that point of time was able to, but finally was it for the benefit of everybody? We still don't know. So that's something that we years ahead will give us a better idea. My next chapter is actually again on energy. As I said, energy of course is a core natural resources, and 70% of the total energy that the region actually produces is taken in by the domestic sector actually. And it also certainly means that if you're you know if your domestic sector doing, then there's obviously very little which is left for the non-domestic sector of the region. So again, if you're looking at and doing heavy industries or whatever, which again all very energy reliant, then you again have to be taking energy from the rest of other areas, not from the northeast. So your northeast energy potential, which is very good, which a lot of it is tapped actually, but much of it goes into supplying your domestic sector. Not much is left in terms of industry and other sectors. While today, and I think I've tried to do that, and I'm sure there are many gaps, but the whole region of, again, in the energy sector have actually broken into many parts, and we've seen again potential of the hydro projects. But over the years, and you young students would also know about the fears of climate change, the problems of large buildings, large projects, which actually are very difficult to manage under these kind of terrain. It's clear also we realized that India is moving away from these large hydro projects, which were at one point of time our key milestone projects that India post independence. But subsequently things have changed. Our understanding of nature has changed. Our understanding of managing terrain and difficult terrain, that too has changed. So right now what is being flagged all across, especially for the northeast, is mini projects and mini grids, and that I think is receiving greater traction, very positively so. Again, there are many exceptions, like as I said, in most of the things that I'm talking about, Assam, of course, an exception. Again, Tripura is a huge exception. If you see the way Tripura and Bangladesh has been able to, I mean, our first takeaway in this entire friendship that we build with Bangladesh has been with energy on the sector.
Yes.
Contributed largely. So there are exceptions to that, but when I'm talking about Northeast, I'm talking about all the 7, 8 states together. In that sense, I would say it's a very specific spaces that you can find energy potential actually. So right now we the grid transit parameter that's going on, and we again, as I said, given the history of Northeast, I'm not sure how much of it would be successfully implemented, because we've always seen that there's a kind of a gap between your planning and your implementations, especially in the Northeast. So that's going to be there. My next chapter is actually the political chapter, which is, I think, for me, a core chapter in the book. I was very indecisive whether I wanted right in the middle, whether I wanted in the front, because while many of us, of course, have been part of this whole, rhetoric about how it's all about economics, we've realized in the Northeast it's not always about economics. And no matter how much a particular issues, huge potential, huge project reports, but it actually flattens out. It doesn't take place. Why? Because the political quagmire is so complex. And I think this is something that we need to be very, very cognizant when we are talking about Act East policy. As I mentioned in the first few minutes, that center and state is actually working closely after this huge positive takeaway. But at the same time, I would actually say, and I say this with a sense of responsibility, that there are many issues which are sending cross messages, not only to the people of North at large, but also to play a particular card. The citizenship issue has, of course, not endeared large population there. But I feel a lot of political issues that are taking place today while we speak is really self-defeating. I'm not sure why political leaders do that, but whatever reason. But I would just end here by saying that there is absolutely no substitute for good governance. And if we do not have good governance on the ground, we will only see these jostlings for space, a fight for, that political space will actually, but none of that will see fruition unless we have a kind of stability on the ground, which only political resolutions, that for me is core of understanding Northeast. I'm going to close in the next few minutes by discussing the next two chapters. So while I'm discussing, but a lot is taking place right, I think it's all a work in progress, and I'm sure I will come back to your center 10 years from now and then discuss how all of these projects have taken place and how it's actually benefited the region and the neighborhood. But for now, core arguments are taking place in various sizes right now. What we need to do, and again, that has also been a milestone achievement of this present Act East policy, is building cross-border transport linkages, not only within the region, but in the years to come from India, but with the neighborhood. With, we've actually Northeast cross-border linkages, and again, the book has many details as to how the Nepal and Bhutan were able to access our ports and our facilities so easily. So, those are something very, very good, positive developments that has taken place here. But again, a lot of it is yet limited. I'll tell you why. Let's look at the region. As I said, cross-border facilities have taken place. Bangladesh and India working very closely. Yes. There is this new side of Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, which is growing. I think all of you know, which is the acronym of BBIN. BBIN Motor Vehicle Act was agreed upon, I think 6 years ago. It is yet to be functional. Nepal at one point of time actually all the cities that were built in Bangladesh, we helped them, and Bangladesh allowed us, gave us that transit, and we were able to work together. So we gave into many of their demands, they gave into many of our demands. So a lot was very successfully decided upon, but again, in terms of actually taking the project through, we still not been able to do it. So let me, skip from Bangladesh to the Myanmar side. Myanmar cross-border at the Manipur level it's actually there's a very momentous border kind of a thing, even a whole lot of informal movement that takes place. And movement. But in terms of big ticket items, there are two big ticket items on the Myanmar side right now. There are many several other smaller projects on the way, but I've discussed that in greater detail. The thought that we would use that access to the littoral's water and ensure the lot of the cargo that Northeast needed, so from different parts of India, including, of course, would be connected to the Kolkata port, would come in here. The project has been on for 10-12 years. I mean, I'm forgetting, I just actually wrote a paper recently for Kutch organization on this. But again, conditions being difficult, there are insurgency issues, we've not been able to actually complete the project. The other third one, which is part of that, is the trilateral highway, which connects Myanmar, Thailand to our northeast Manipur. Again, the road is almost being built, I'm told. The Manipur side is the one which is now in the process of being developed, but the side which is on their side, which is Myanmar. But again, and while we keep discussing many of these issues, many of my friends who work on the region keep telling us that this trilateral highway is much used to India. What is the cargo that we send through the road? Nothing. This actually will be used by China. So this is another new element. We want to build a road at our own expense, maintain that also, and while some third party countries uses that to bring their commerce, so there are lots of ifs and buts to this. But what I'm so I mean, there are issues, but again, as I said, in terms of reaching out to Bangladesh and Northeast, there has much been done. But and Northeast again is really the bridgehead here. And but let me the penultimate chapter actually, where I'm actually arguing for the fact that because we've got this good positive outreach with the neighborhood. Of course, Myanmar right now is going through difficult times, but I'm sure things will settle down. We've got India is going to continue with the work engagement. Bangladesh and India is working very closely now. What I'm actually suggesting that while many of these projects, as I said, development projects from transport corridors to economic schemes will take a decade to fall into place before the region actually starts reaping the corresponding dividends. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to take a lot of time. In the meantime, we prepare the ground condition to ensure that the region is able to adapt to the changing circumstances. As I said, Northeast region not take to transformations which come overnight. So this is my whole argument here then, is that why are we not examining a border economic changes? So I'm actually talked about how a border community needs to be done here, and what I've and Northeast and Myanmar, that largely border people have similar kind of lives. They do not have accesses to many of the services that mainland Bangladesh, mainland India, or mainland Manipur actually offer. Whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's any other service that you need, the borderland people are more or less limited, if not totally marginal, from what is happening in the rest of the country. So what I'm suggesting, and I've actually used border huts, I've actually know that I've actually said the border huts, which actually are already operational, and I visited all of them, so I've seen how they are very, very effective. There are many other issues which the government is working on, but they establish a few more. I mean, that's, I think, on the plan very much, and I'm sure those are going to be functional sometime soon. What I'm suggesting is as the core elemental structure on the borders. My argument here is that I don't need easily available, and I could also probably understand why it's not attractive, because often big projects get big ideas, big people on the table. Very low digital space for within the limit of. This is some, I think, that we're able to development cross-border educational program. Again, India has expertise in all of these sectors in terms of outreach of education and things. There is no reason why India will not be able to. And given the fact that I said that both with Bangladesh and with Myanmar, that we have started, that Myanmar is going through a bit of instability just now. So, but again, I've seen often the simple ideas take very little time, a lot of time for people to take to it. But I would actually say, if we start building a border community zone right away. So I in fact suggested the other day when I was talking at another body. Let's if it's successful, we build it further. We don't need grandiose plans of having acres of districts involved. No, just let's do small model projects. That's affected. Let's take it forward. And again, as I say, I'm lucky that I've been able to these reason. There is no that the Act East policy, let me sum up by saying that has led to increased attention in the Northeast region by both New Delhi as well as internationally, which is never the case. Northeast was isolated in every which way. So there is now opening of the Northeast. So there is this whole idea of making Northeast a part of the larger national narrative, which is based on two primary considerations. First, that the assets of Northeast needs to be fully utilized and understood better, and see how the benefits can be spread amongst its own people, the rest of India. And secondly, the region, if better explored with mainstream India, and of course neighborhood comes in as part of that, and that is something I think is really a core part of thing. But essentially, what I whatever in a limited way I understand the Northeast is markers which are based on market revenue do not have a great fit in Northeast region. You have to look at Northeast through a different prism. Northeast is planned, implemented, do not happen here. Issues of cultural ethos, traditional value systems continue to influence people's choices. I think this is something we have to be very, very cognizant when we are discussing these development. So we need to understand that there is also no single voice that speaks in the Northeast. While Assam does have some geographic location advantages, it is not representative of all the other settlements. And I think each state is in a varied level of development, have different options, have different opportunities. I understand that we need one single wand which is of development and growth, which can apply to Northeast. I think that's my main caution here. And I essentially argue that the center really has to dovetail with the needs and aspirations of the region and not the other way around. The Northeast region needs to understand, determine their journey, their goal. Only then will you have a meaningful experience. The bottoms-up approach is far more effective than the top-down process. And we know that growth and development in many parts of India has actually happened through the top-down process. But within the Northeast approach is far more effective in bringing about a transformation, and incremental measures is something that the region can absorb. The Act East policy really substantially contributes to the region's connectivity to the rest of India, but while ushering in all the consequent development which is connected with the mainland, it also constantly addresses the locational advantage of the region for long. But at the same time, we need to every step of the way understand the inherent nuances that Northeast offers, which the rest of India doesn't. I'm going to end here, and there's a postscript after that, which is largely prescriptive. But I hope all of you are going to read the book and see if I am able to appeal to your ideas in the subject also. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks a lot for taking us through the book, and I have a lot of things to say about the book, but let me just, for the benefit of again the audience who haven't yet read the book, let me just put it this way, that there are a number of generic, let's say, knowledge and information about the Northeast. But what the book does, as the author herself pointed out, is anyone who is interested in looking at a data-rich book about each of the connectivity projects which are working out in the Northeast and what stage they are in, each of the energy-driven projects. I was very fascinated by the chapter on connectivity within NER. That's really the crux of the point, as she pointed out. Trilateral highway from where to where, but if you don't connect, for example, the points within the Northeast itself. So I'll come back to all of that. Let me just say that it's a richly detailed book, and if you are having lack of resources in terms of finding those details about the connectivity projects, this is the book to read. So I'll come back to the book again, but before that, let me request Shri Seshadri Jari to give his special remarks on the presentation and on the book. Sir, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Monish, and thank you, Dr. Sreeradha Datta, for such an exhaustive presentation. In fact, I was afraid that the more you present your book, probably the temptation to buy the book would be less. So I would still request the students to buy the book. Of course, our library will buy the book and provide it to the students. But as Monish has very rightly pointed out, it's really very exhaustive. And of course, Monish and you have been lucky enough to visit Northeast very often. Unlike me, I can't say that I visited Northeast to such an extent. So I could just glance through some of the pages of the book, but even that I found to be very educative. So I must really congratulate you for such an exhaustive work. And as you very rightly pointed out, this is the second edition, probably. I won't call it second edition, but an addition to what you have already written in 1999. And you have very rightly also again pointed out that your stint with Mackay's has given you a much broader outlook as far as looking at Northeast is concerned. So actually Northeast, as you have pointed out in your book, becomes very important region for a number of reasons.
I can't hear you.
Northeast becomes
Manish?
an important, yeah. Is it okay now? Is it okay now? I hope my connectivity is okay here. Monish, is it okay?
I can hear you, but Dr. Datta cannot hear you, it seems.
Oh, yeah, some connectivity issue must be there.
Actually, there's a problem in Chitranjan Park. I couldn't hear Radha well either. Please go carry on. We can hear you.
Yeah. So.
Ma'am, can you hear him?
Yeah, I think the connection problems are there. Little bit of connectivity problem is there, I think. And another important aspect why Northeast is important is also that we should remember that Northeast, India's Northeast is actually a link between the Himalayas and the sea. So it is, we always connect Kashmir and Kanyakumari, but more importantly, it is the Northeast which connects the Himalayan region to actually the Indian Ocean through Bay of Bengal. So Northeast becomes very important not only for the connectivity between Himalayas and Bay of Bengal, but also becomes very important for the connectivity between India and all the regional organizations that cater to the Southeast Asia, especially BIMSTEC. So I think that is another aspect where the Northeast plays an important role. Third and the most important aspect of Northeast is again the connectivity not only to Indian Ocean region but also to the larger Indo-Pacific region. So as Sreeradha has rightly pointed out in her presentation just now, and also the book has got a number of references to the importance of Northeast and the emerging concept of Indo-Pacific. Now, Indo-Pacific is going to be the most important element as far as the regional connectivity and organizational strategy is concerned, as far as India is concerned. So, from Asia-Pacific, we have moved on to Indo-Pacific. And as we moved on from Asia-Pacific to Indo-Pacific, we should remember that like 1991, when Northeast Look East policy was initiated, The actual look east policy, the first brick of the look east policy was probably laid in 1971, not just 1991, 1971, when Bangladesh became an independent country. So imagine the strategic and security issues that would have come up as far as look east policy is concerned had 1971 not happened. So now, with this, I would really look at some of the issues that the book flags. The book has very rightly has flagged the issue of the cultural diversity and richness, both of Northeast. I think there has not been enough recognition within the rest of the country as far as the cultural diversification of Northeast is concerned. For a large number of Indians, Northeast still begins at Kolkata and ends with Kolkata. No, it is not the case. Northeast does not end and begin with Kolkata. Northeast does not end and begin with Assam also. Beyond Kolkata, beyond Guwahati, there is a vast area of Northeast, and I'm sure biggest contribution of Sreeradha's book is this, that she very rightly pinpoints the importance not only of Kolkata or Guwahati, but also the importance of each and every point of connectivity in the Northeast. I really must commend your efforts in going to all these places and writing about it. You mentioned about some of the airports, and which some of them are not functioning. I don't think that should be a problem. I think even 20 airports or less, we can have even half a dozen airports or a dozen airports even more. But as you very rightly said, air connectivity is not the only connectivity. There has to be other types of connectivity also. As far as agriculture is concerned, again, Northeast has a huge potential as far as step farming is concerned. And in most of the areas in Northeast, the step farming is done. You are very rightly pointed out that the agriculture, as far as Bangladesh is concerned, uses every inch of the land that is available. But when it comes to beyond Bangladesh, when it comes to the Indian border, whether it is Mizoram or whether it is Nagaland, the mountainous terrain does not allow maximum use of land. As I mean, like they say in Bhutan, only 3% of the land is plain, 97% of the land is mountainous. So this terrain issue is again a major issue as far as agriculture is concerned, as far as connectivity is concerned. These are all some of the areas that we have already looked into, and successive governments, right from Narasimha Rao's government, then Vajpayee government initiated donor, and then Dr. Manmohan Singh's government increased the connectivity issues as far as Northeast is concerned. But again, Narendra Modi government since 2014 has initiated and laid the stress on look east, act east. So it is not just look east, but you have to act also. So the emphasis on acting as far as Northeast is concerned was started from 2014. But I think I'm sure. I mean, you cannot rest your laurels here. You cannot say that I've written 2 books and thus far and no further. I think your next book, and you better start preparing on your next book right from now onwards. And we will strongly recommend to Vivekananda International Foundation to allow you to complete the third book also, as far as Northeast is concerned. That should look at what else donor can do, what else the cultural connectivity issue can be done, and also can we really link 1971 to 2021? Can this can this bridge between 1971 to 2021 can be built in such a manner that what other steps we have to take as far as taking the real Northeast to its logical conclusion, that is linking Northeast of India with the larger region of Indo-Pacific. That is the issue which is of very prime importance, not only for strategic and security aspect, but also for economy and connectivity issue. So this is a very wide region which we have taken, and I won't take much of students' time, because they would also be asking you more questions. And I'm sure you will be more available to Manipal University and Department of Geopolitics and International Relations as far as Northeast is concerned. And your book, if your book is able to give us at least 10 topics, and for 10, at least 10 of our students to pick up points from your book and elaborate on it and make it not only a MA dissertation, but also if they are able to do a PhD on some of these issues, it will be really a very good contribution. And thank you, extremely thank you for such a wonderful beginning that you have made. Thank you, Sreeradha. And back to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sri Chariji, for again, laying out the relevance of this particular book, and which really, I think, as you pointed out, shows a roadmap for a number of other research themes that can be looked upon. One of the things that the book, uh, and the author herself mentioned it. This is very interesting section on border community zones. That I found that really interesting, which is not really formal in the sense of uh, but it's kind of a mushrooming that leads to something else. So I think that is something that one can really look forward to, and if those kind of things are replicable in other border economies and other things. I would before I have my own questions, I will see if students have questions of their own. So while students are raising their hands, yes, as I suspected, General Ramesh Chopra is the first one to raise his hand. General, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Manish. I have some idea of Northeast because I've spent about 11 years of my service there. And the first of the 4 wars that I fought was in NIFA. You can't get any more Northeast than that. Okay, 2 quick observations. One, whenever you go to the Northeast, they say that they should join the mainstream. I've never agreed. If India wants Northeast to progress the way Radha has brought out in a super fashion, the mainstream has to go to them. We have to go to them and not they come to India. And my second observation is based on what Shashadri just said. I also fought the 1971 war. Had Bangladesh not happened, 2 things would have been a non-starter. The look east or the act east policy. And number 2, this BIMSTEC, because you would have had East Pakistan in between. Okay, now my intervention to Radha. You have covered Myanmar, but the net was bad. I don't know if you covered what I'm going to ask. I want to know the impact of the takeover as far as Act East is concerned, especially the Northeast. One, connectivity, you touched on it. I don't care if China uses the trilateral, but what is the effect of the Tatmadaw takeover going to take, one, on the trilateral? 2, to help Bangladesh and Myanmar, India is doing a lot of work in the Rakhine state, Arakans. Now, is that rehabilitation going to be affected? And finally, the influence of China, according to me, will be greater. Do you have any views, Radha? Thank you, Manish.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, do you want to take these questions, or should I open the floor for questions, 1 or 2 questions from the students?
I could take this back to the floor. Is that okay? Mr. Chari, thank you for your comments. You've always been very kind with me, I know. Times that we've met together. Am I not audible? Is it okay? My net is seem to be a problem, I think. Can you hear me now?
You can try putting up the video and speaking or something.
Okay, let me try that. Can you hear this? Is this better? No, you said
it's better. It's better now. But go ahead. I think
better now. Okay.
Yes.
I think in between it's coming and going. Okay. Chari has always been very kind whenever we meet, and we've had many interesting discussions, even at Manipal, if you remember. So I think we kind of align on our ideas and I'm always benefited from your comments and your suggestions. So thank you, and I'm so it's a real honor and privilege for me. Thank you, Charity, for being here. Coming back to the point that General Chopra made, that I actually believe that the Tatmada, though in the larger context, democracy transition in Myanmar is very important to India. I don't think there is any two ways about that. But at the same time, the Tatmada works very closely with India, and they are not very happy about China. They are not very happy about the kind of intrusion that Chinese have on them. So for them, India has actually always been a safeguard element. And they have always, very impressed with the idea that India does not have the kind of intrusiveness which foreign powers have. So in that context, that even if Tatmadaw is to hang in here, as they say, for a year, you can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So I think, so right now, the way I see, while there is a civil movement on, and there seems to be so many rumors about how Chinese are sending in their troops. I don't know. I don't go with it because I believe Myanmar Tatmadaw is a complete. You have read very nationalistic there, and the whole, of course, the General Liang's, particular move. But I think the whole army military is actually supporting him, able to, while they may have, bitten off much more than they can chew. They didn't, I don't think, understood the kind of, people's reaction. They were just thinking it's Yangon, but the rest of country seems to be also. So they will finally, the fact that he wanted to stay on there, he's pervasive, corruption, all of that. But irrespective, I think Tatmadaw will never lose its core element there. I mean, that's the nature of the country. So I do not see a hugely transformed, completely democratic Myanmar emerging. And even if a completely transformed Myanmar emerges, it's going to be unstable like many of what we have in the neighborhood, which is not something, it's a process. But again, as I said, that we have very closely with actually agrees to it, that we must keep our options in terms of the other ethnic elements in Myanmar. We have not reached out to them. And I'm not talking about the insurgent factors. There are actually people who from the small ethnic groups who have fought parliamentary elections this time and won some few numbers. We must reach out to them. We must keep our, because I'm totally convinced NLD not going to be very pro-Indian. NLD has a different way of functioning. It's a political party. It's a political, they're in power. They were some time back ago, and we have worked. But in terms of the democratic transition, that leader of NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi, is very, very autocratic. She will ensure that those ethnic rebels do not come to power, which is the peace process that they were doing was very ineffective. I mean, it's simple. Tatmadaw was doing, it was a kind of a lip service that they were doing. So to actually make it a larger democratic transition is going to take a while. So, but again, coming back on the Rohingyas, irrespective of whether it's the Tatmada or the NLD, nobody cares about Rohingyas. It's only the smaller ethnic factions. If Arakan can have some respectability, let their arms down, come into the political process, that there will be some recognition as to how you can bring back the Rohingyas. Otherwise, whether it's Aung San Suu Kyi's political party or whether it's Tatmadaw, they are completely indifferent to the problems that the Rohingyas are facing. And I've been to those camps and I know what pathetic lives they have. So here again, conversation is very important. India, they feel, has not done enough. Bangladeshis feel, Rohingyas feel, and I would tend to agree with it, because just by building some, rebuilding some of these burnt houses, but not being able to ensure that repatriation and their, future stability, political, less persecuted life can take place, you can't ensure that the movement of the population will happen. It's a very tricky situation. Rohingya rights of China, but China is not interested. I mean, as long as they get their economy commerce and everything out of Myanmar. And again, here India needs to start the projects. Like I'm saying, that the Kavadan project, I mean, it's dump on his head. I don't know what you are doing there. What job you're doing such great work. There is no one big ticket item you're doing in Myanmar which is actually going to translate into goodness. Whole population of Myanmar love India. I mean, there is no doubt about the fact, more so because they want to diminish the influence of China and would rather much have India engage with them much more strongly. I very much doubt if that is happening, but I would actually want India to be engaging more. And that's something that whether it's a Tatmada, well say elected government, all of them want India to engage. I'll close here, Manish. You want to open up the floor?
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Do we have questions from the students in the classroom? You can raise your hands using the handlebar. Anyone? Okay. Basu, please go ahead.
This Basu sir, student student in the department. Myself, communication borders. How should these borders space
You are showing
the security issues? Yeah, this was my question.
Vasu, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. I couldn't hear you actually. Manish, could you hear him?
was echoing. Vasu?
Probably he can type it in the message.
Yeah.
For him. Any more questions? Apart from Basu, you can type in the chat box, or you can try once more. And
in the meanwhile, Dr. Manish, you can start. You can ask something.
We perceive our South Asian borders as an economic sharing space or as a security issue?
Okay, I got that. Okay, shall I wait for some of
okay, so I think I can chip in with my own questions there and probably pass the floor to you, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am, to you?
Yes.
Yes. So following up on Basu's question on, the economy versus security sort of a thing, I found a very interesting line in the 78th page of the book, which is, as often pointed out, it is the pressure from Delhi that is keeping the projects going. Regional interests and incentives seem to be as low as in the past. So the first question is, please elaborate on that for our benefit. The second one, ma'am, is something that I have raised quite a bit in a couple of forums. Maybe it wasn't heard upon, or but this is something because it chimes with your own thought process about the bottom-up approach, and aligning Northeast and the AKIS policy. Because talking about railway projects specifically, one of the things that I think one should pay attention to is the public perception in these states and the society regarding the projects itself. And very interestingly, I think there was a very popular, Manipuri Valley movie, right? So it's not a very well-made movie, but the subject of the movie interested me because it reflects the perception also, in the sense that the movie's name is 23rd Century, and they kind of oversee, like, okay, years from now on there will be an Imphal railway station. So that's the futuristic scene of the movie. And when they see Imphal railway station in the future, what you see in the movie is not a positive perception of the coming of railway station. It is filled with negative perceptions of what bad things railway station can bring to Imphal as a city. So if you have such kind of popular perceptions which gets reflected in popular culture in the form of movies or songs, including even this what you can call as almost a nativist sort of an idea of like if railway comes, then they will bring in more people from outside, chiming in with the foreigners, agitation and all those things. So how do we deal with this issue of public perception? And the last one is, when we think of a conceptual framework of analyzing Northeast, although I think we sort of would both agree, as you are saying, that Northeast is not a monolith. But whenever I sort of kind of discuss with Western audiences about, Northeast, uh, Sanjeev Barwa's durable disorder seems to be quite popular still. So from your own perception of looking at a conceptual analysis of Northeast, uh, do you think it is still applicable, Barwa's durable disorder, or do you see that a new frameworks are needed in order to analyze what's really the political quagmire that you were talking about as far as Northeast is concerned? So those are my concerns.
Let me respond. Can you hear me, Manish?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay. So let me begin with Vasu's query about how whether I'm looking at security engagement or more of economy. Actually, Vasu, the way the relationship is now panning out with the neighborhood, and specifically here, of course, Bangladesh and Myanmar, our relationship in terms of the security issues are dealt with positively in the sense that both the countries' government are actually addressing our core concern, which is security. So India will not be able to do any business with anybody until unless that core concern is addressed. And if you recall it with Bangladesh from 2010 onwards, the fact that we've been able to have this huge shift from what it was earlier was because Bangladesh addressed our security concerns. Similarly, if you recall, just before the coup, in fact, just before elections, when our foreign secretary went to Myanmar, our army chief also went, which also tells you that from the security aspect, Myanmar's relationship with has always been very, very strong. In fact, we've been able to reach out to Myanmar and do the kind of outreach projects and stuff is because they've also been able to they've showed their concern, they've addressed the concerns that we had in terms of security issues and cross-border elements, which I think was applicable. So my whole idea is that today we have two neighbors on both sides who are very cognizant of our concerns and have addressed them very, very well. I mean, there is no doubt on that front. So, but at the same time, we can't stop there. It's again security issues are a work in progress because it's not only, I mean, non-state actors of different sorts and of different types. And again, like I mentioned, when you're talking about the political instability within Northeast and when we are playing a religious card, which tends to rackle off because again, the mix of religion that we have in the Northeast of Buddhists and animists and Christians and Muslims and Hindus, we have to be sensitive to each other's concerns as to what what construes a security paradigm. So here, I think in terms of the cross-border issues, we are actually the security paradigm is far more stronger. I'm upset about the fact that domestically we are upsetting the apple cart, which is almost stabilized. We are reopening a can of worms, which I thought was not required. That's my own personal opinion, but I'm pretty much strong about this that I do not even for my voters' constituency. I mean, that's not acceptable because the whole ethnic mosaic in Northeast has taken a very long time to stabilize. So we don't want to, kind of, I don't ever want to play one against the other. I think that's some side for me to engage on the border community. If I'm going to have young children come over, do my own schools, that they will have access to some of my we look at people have actually benefited in interest. I do not think there is any way I'm going to break out of that. That is core, but that code can be addressed and your neighbors have addressed. Now, if that forward can only happen when you're secured only when you know and understand that side. So when you're actually doing livelihood programs together, look at kind of positive reverberation of access. Every neighbor was whipping us a couple of months ago. I mean, we've seen the vaccination thing that spread has given us so much of win-win kind of a situation. This is what I'm saying, that while the neighbors have understood our concerns, they have also addressed them in many ways. And again, is actually on security imperatives, where all of us are doing information sharing, data collecting, being on each other's platform to ensure that we are able to address each other's core concern. But my point is, even at the borders or elsewhere, your engagement with each other, learning to understand what is important to you and your land, your ethos, actually is a way of feeding into that security parameter. They go hand in hand. They are not purposes. And the more you know each other, understand each other, you will be able to see the signals better. In fact, if you have a standoff, you will never understand them, never address them. In any state of global relationship, the wild geese element is always there. Just exactly what happened in Tatmadaw just now in Myanmar. But the fact that we have the security apparatus also with the elected government has given us a kind of a safety measure that our interests are taken care of. They have not thrown any of the Indian projects and things out of the door, right? They've said no, let this be. So the economic engagement, the whole gamut, I mean, the book has more deep also in other spelled out the way we could engage. My point is that you are being a force multiplier to that security imperative, which is core for all of us. I hope, Vasu, I've been able to explain a little what I meant in terms of the engagement here. Coming back to Monish, of course, I have a lot of respect for Professor Sanjeev Baru. I think all of us of North, but I mean, he takes a certain perspective which I think we need to modify now. And while, again, book, if you read Monish, you'll know that I'm very skeptic of many of these projects, and I the page that you mentioned. And in fact, you yourself have explained that and this story, this film that you mentioned, so to what I'm writing in the book. I mean, I don't recall. He started this public division, I think, whether see explaining how political. I always argued they only reached out to a very small lot. I mean, earlier was not even any attempt to even talk to Northeast, because we thought Northeast lives in their own, kind of a isolated state where we don't have. But actually, the fact from Luki is that it became part of a narrative. I think there is a way that we can now the framework emerging, but that emergent new framework away from what Sanjeev Barua mentions or talks about, what he does was very true, very relevant for the last 5 decades. I mean, I have never questioned that because it's true. But I think Mr. Chariji's suggestion that I should start working on the book. I'm saying these small incremental changes is important, but at the same time, I don't know whether I highlighted this, but my book is also about that you have to have a dialogue with the Northeast stakeholders constantly. It is not one donor coming and doing one exercise. I mean, this is absolutely no, how shall I say, and we did a program, and donor was our partner. Chariji, you won't believe it. There were so many professors, and anybody who knows me in the Northeast knows that I'm there constantly, and many of the professors in all the universities consider me just like held back, didn't come up for a conference because they said donor was your partner. Now, donor is a partner because we are a government-funded organization. Donor was
Right.
a Northeast.
Yeah. I can understand. These are some of the problems.
But because the lot of the public perception was that yes, so this is something that so coming back to Monish, I think the point is that many of them, and see, right now for Meghalaya we've never had a inner line permit for so long, but the minute this whole citizenship issues come up, all lot of other these discussing inner line permit. I mean, is limited. Their wherewithal is limited. So they are very. I don't think center wants to do that, but center and state to be in a continued dialogue instead of saying, okay, I know what's good for you. Okay, so let this be. The point is not that I don't know what is good for you.
Yeah, Manish.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Is there any more questions from the student community? Okay, if there are no more questions, I take this opportunity to invite my colleague, Dr. Ravindranathan, to propose a formal vote of thanks. Before that, I would like to say that this discussion on the book would have gone on for always. It's just a paucity of time that we had to put a hold on it here. But whenever I get an opportunity to meet you, ma'am, I need the author's signature, and also I need to ask all the questions of the notes that I put in the book. So it's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure to listen to you and interact with you. And as Chariji pointed out, we look forward to the next book that will take us further into the quagmire called Northeast. Okay, so I invite my colleague, Dr. Ravindranathan, to propose the formal vote of thanks. Sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Manish. Thank you for asking me. Good evening, everyone.
Before him, let me just say thank you once again to the entire department for having. Yeah, no. Sorry, please carry on. I just want to thank you for we close. That I'm really privileged to be doing this discussion with you today.
Right. Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Ravindranathan. I'm here to present the vote of thanks for today's book discussion on Act East Policy and Northeast India, organized by Northeast Studies Center, Department of Geopolitics, Mahel. First, I would like to thank Dr. Sreeradha Datta, the Center Head and Senior Fellow, Neighborhood Studies, Vivekananda International Foundation, and the author of the book. We expect that the book discussion will enhance the understanding of our students and others on the relevance and significance of the Northeast region, which is expected to act as the entry point to India's Act East policy. Yeah, I am pretty sure that the profounding understanding of Dr. Sreeradha Datta on the strategic importance of the Northeast region and Act East policy of India will help us in our studies in the future. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Sreeradha Datta for taking out time from her busy schedule and enlightening us with the knowledge. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Sri Seshadri Chari, eminent strategic analyst and political commentator and chairman China Studies Program Mahir, for providing an eloquent analysis of the book and significance of the of both the Northeast region and Actist policy in his special remarks. Thank you, Chari sir.
Thank you.
On behalf of the department, I would like to place my sincere thanks to Professor Arvind Kumar, formerly Professor and Head of the Department of Geopolitics, who conceived the idea of the book discussion and connected the department with the author. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Dr. Nandkishore, the Head of the Department of Geopolitics, who took initiative to organize the book discussion today and extended support to our colleagues to make the event very smooth. Thank you, Dr. Kishore. And I would like to thank Dr. Monish Tarangbam, coordinator of the Northeast Studies Program, Mahe, who organized and moderated the book discussion and encouraged us to take initiative to be part of this program. And on behalf of my colleagues, I thank you for your support. I want to thank my colleagues, Dr. Anand, Dr. Dhanashree, and apart from Dr. Kishore and Dr. Monish, for their support and encouragement. I would like to thank our student community for their active participation. I extend our sincere thanks to the participants from various segments who attended the book discussion. I would end my vote of thanks here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye.
Pleasure.
See you soon.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon all. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.